Aztec Mythology, a concise guide to the gods, heroes, sagas, rituals, and beliefs of Aztec myths. Written by Bernard Hayes for Hasty Histories. Narrated by Gareth Johnson. Chapter 1. Aztec Mythology. The mythology of the Aztec civilization, which dominated central Mexico in the 1400s and early 1500s, described a universe of grandeur and dread. Worlds were created and destroyed in the myths, and splendid gods warred among themselves. Everyday items, colors, numbers, direction, days of the calendar took on special meaning because each was associated with a deity. Aztec religious life ranged from keeping small pottery statues of the gods in homes to attending elaborate public ceremonies involving human sacrifices. Origins and influences. The Aztecs migrated to central Mexico from the north in the 1200s. According to their legends, they came from a land called Aztlan, the source of their name. The Aztecs were not a single people, but several groups, including the Coluja Mexica, the Mexica, and the Tenocha. In the early 1300s, these groups formed an alliance and together founded a city-state called Tenochtitlan, on the site where Mexico City stands today. The people of Tenochtitlan rose to power and conquered a large empire during the 1400s. The Aztecs were newcomers in a region long occupied by earlier civilizations, such as those of the Olmecs and Toltecs, who had developed a pantheon of gods and a body of myths and legends. The Aztecs absorbed deities, stories, and beliefs from these earlier people and from the Maya of southern Mexico. As a result, Aztec mythology contained religious and mythological traditions that many groups in Mexico and Central America shared. However, under the Aztecs, certain aspects of the religion, notably human sacrifice, came to the forefront. Major themes and deities. In the Aztec view of the universe, human life was small and insignificant. An individual's fate was shaped by forces beyond his or her control. The gods created people to work and fight for them. They did not offer favors or grant direct protection, although failure to serve the gods properly could lead to doom and destruction. Main themes. The idea that people were servants of the gods was a theme that ran through Aztec mythology. Humans had the responsibility of keeping the gods fed, otherwise disaster could strike at any time. The food of the gods was a precious substance found in human blood. The need to satisfy the gods, especially the sun god, gave rise to a related theme, human sacrifice. The fiery birth of the sun. According to Aztec myth, at the beginning of this world, darkness covered the earth. The gods gathered at a sacred place and made a fire. Nanhuatzin, one of the gods, leaped into the fire and came out as the sun. However, before he could begin to move through the sky, the other gods had to give the sun their blood. This was one of several myths relating how the gods sacrificed themselves to set the world in motion. Through bloodletting and human sacrifice, people imitated the sacrifices made by the gods, and kept the sun alive by feeding it with blood. Ritual ceremony that follows a set pattern. Priests conducted ceremonies at the temples, often with crowds in attendance. With song and dance, masked performers acted out myths, and the priests offered sacrifices. To prepare for ceremonies, the priests performed a ritual bloodletting, which involved pulling barbed cords across their tongues or other body parts to draw blood. Bloodletting was similar to a Mayan ceremony known as the Vision Quest. Peoples before the Aztecs had practiced human sacrifice, but the Aztecs made it the centerpiece of their rituals. Spanish explorers reported witnessing ceremonies in which hundreds of people met their deaths on sacrificial altars. The need for prisoners to sacrifice was one reason for the Aztecs' drive to conquer other Indians, although it was certainly not the only reason. Sacrifice was linked to another theme, that of death and rebirth. The Aztecs believed that the world had died and been reborn several times, and that the gods also died and were reborn. Sometimes the gods even sacrificed themselves for the good of the world. Though death loomed large in Aztec mythology, it was always balanced by fertility and the celebration of life and growth. Another important idea in Aztec mythology was that a predetermined fate shaped human lives. The Aztec ball game, about which historians know little, may have been related to this theme. Aztec temples, like those of other people throughout Mexico and Central America, had walled courts where teams of players struck a rubber ball with their hips, elbows, and knees, trying to drive it through a stone ring. Some historians believe that the game represented the human struggle to control destiny. It was a religious ritual, not simply a sport, and players may have been sacrificed after the game. The theme of fate was also reflected in the Aztecs' use of the calendar. Both the Aztecs and the Maya developed elaborate systems of recording dates with two calendars: a 365-day solar calendar, based on the position of the sun, and a 260-day ritual calendar used for divination. Each day of the ritual calendar was influenced by a unique combination of gods and goddesses. Divination involved interpreting the positive or negative meanings of these influences, which determined an individual's fate. Priests also used the ritual calendar to choose the most favorable days for such activities as erecting buildings, planting crops, and waging war. The 365-day and 260-day cycles meshed, like a smaller wheel within a larger one, to create a 52-year cycle called the calendar round. At the end of a calendar round, the Aztecs put out all their fires to begin a new calendar round. Priests oversaw a ceremony in which new fires were lit from flames burning in a sacrificial victim's chest. A third key theme of Aztec myth was that of duality, a balance between two equal and opposing forces. Many of the Aztec gods and goddesses were dualistic, which meant that they had two sides or roles. Deities often functioned in pairs or opposites. In addition, the same god could appear under multiple names or identities, perhaps because the Aztecs had blended elements of their myths from a variety of sources. Primal earliest, existing before other. Major deities. Duality was the basic element of the primal deity Ometacutli, who had a male side called Ometiol and a female side known as Omekihuatl. The other gods and goddesses were their offspring. Their first four children were Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl, Huitzilopochtli, and Zipetotec, the creator gods of Aztec mythology. Coatlicue, the Aztec god of earth, wore a skirt made out of snakes and a necklace of human hearts. She was usually portrayed with clawed hands and feet. This monumental statue of Coatlicue measures more than 8 feet tall. Originally a Toltec god, Tezcatlipoca, lord of smoking mirrors, was god of the night sky. The color black and the direction north were associated with him. He possessed a magical mirror that allowed him to see inside people's hearts, and the Aztecs considered themselves his slaves. In his animal form he appeared as a jaguar. His dual nature caused him to bring good fortune sometimes, and misery at others. Tezcatlipoca's great rival and opponent in cosmic battles, as well as his partner in acts of creation, was Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent, and ancient Mexican and Central American deity associated in Aztec mythology with the color white and the direction west. Some stories about Quetzalcoatl referred to him as an earthly priest king, suggesting there may have been a Toltec king by that name whose legend became mixed with mythology. As a god, Quetzalcoatl had many different aspects. He was the planet Venus, both a morning and evening star, the god of twins, and the god of learning. The Aztecs credited him with inventing the calendar. A peaceful god, Quetzalcoatl accepted sacrifices of animals and jade, but not of human blood. When he was defeated by Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl sailed out into the Atlantic Ocean on a raft of serpents. The legend arose that he would return over the sea from the east at the end of one of the Aztec 52-year calendar cycles. When the white-skinned Spanish invader Hernan Cortés landed in Mexico in 1519, some Aztecs thought he was Quetzalcoatl come again, a belief Cortés encouraged. Huitzilopochtli, hummingbird of the south, a deity that originated with the Aztecs, was the sun and war god. The souls of warriors who died in battle were said to become hummingbirds and follow him across the sky. Blue was his color and south was his direction. The Aztecs claimed that an idol of Huitzilopochtli had led them south during their long migration and told them to build their capital on the site where an eagle was seen eating a snake. The cult of Huitzilopochtli was especially strong in Tenochtitlan, which regarded him as the city's founding god. Xipe-Totec, flayed lord, had a dual nature as well. He was a god of vegetation, of life-giving spring growth, and at the same time a fearsome god of torture and sacrifice. His double meaning reflected the Aztec vision of a universal balance in which new life had to be paid for in blood. Xipe-Totec's color was red, his direction east. The Aztecs took up in addition the worship of Tlaloc, an important god of rain and fertility long known under various names in Mexico and Central America. He governed a host of lesser gods called Tlaloques, who made thunder and rain by smashing their water jars. Other deities, such as Huitzilopochtli's mother, the earth goddess Coatlicue, Lady of the Serpent Skirt, probably played key parts in the religion of the common people, who were mainly farmers. Many deities were associated with flowers, summer, fertility, and corn. Major myths. Many Aztec myths tell all or part of the story of the 5 suns. The Aztecs believed that 4 suns or worlds had existed before theirs. In each case, catastrophic events had destroyed everything and the world had come to an end. Tezcatlipoca created the first sun, known as Nanhui-Ocelotl, or 4 Jaguar. It came to an end when Quetzalcoatl struck down Tezcatlipoca, who became a jaguar and destroyed all the people. Quetzalcoatl was the ruler of the second sun, Nanhui-Ecatl, or 4 Wind. However, Tezcatlipoca threw Quetzalcoatl off his throne, and together the fallen god and the sun were carried off by a hurricane of wind. People turned into monkeys and fled into the forest. The third sun, Nanhiquiahuitl, or 4 Rain, belonged to the rain god Tlaloc. Quetzalcoatl destroyed it with fire that fell from the heavens. The water goddess, Calhiuchichlicu, ruled the 4th sun, known as Nanhui-Atl, or 4 Water. A 5-year flood destroyed that sun, and the people turned into fish. The loss of the ancients. Many stories told of the loss of the ancients, the mythic event in which the first people disappeared from the earth. One version says that Tezcatlipoca stole the sun, but Quetzalcoatl chased him and knocked him back down to earth with a stick. Tezcatlipoca then changed into a jaguar and devoured the people who lived in that world. The Aztecs combined versions of this story to explain the disappearance of people at the end of each of the 4 worlds that existed before theirs. Carvings on a stone calendar found in the 1790s tell how jaguars, fire, wind, and flood in turn destroyed the ancients. The Aztecs lived in the world of Nahui Olin, 4 movement, the 5th sun. They believed that the earth was a flat disk divided into north, east, south, and west quarters, each associated with a colour, special gods, and certain days. At the centre was Huhetotl, god of fire. Above the earth were 13 heavens. Below it were 9 underworlds where the dead dwelled, making 9 an extremely unlucky number. A myth about Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl tells how the world was quartered. They made the earth by seizing a woman from the sky and pulling her into the shape of a cross. Her body became the earth, which, angered by their rough treatment, devoured the dead. Quetzalcoatl, known as the Feathered Spirit, was one of the major gods of Aztec mythology. This carved serpent's head appears on the temple of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan, Mexico. Another myth tells of Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl working together to raise the sky. After the flood that ended the 4th sun, the sky collapsed onto the earth. The 2 gods became trees, and as they grew they pushed the sky up, leaving the trees supporting the sky, one at each end of the earth. They climbed onto the sky and met in the Milky Way. Quetzalcoatl gave life to the people of the 5th sun by gathering the bones of the only man and woman who had survived the long flood and sprinkling them with his own blood. The gods created the world with blood and required the sacrifice of human blood to keep it intact. One day, however, the 5th sun would meet its end in an all-destroying earthquake. The Aztec legacy. The Spanish destroyed as many Aztec documents and images as they could, believing the Aztec religion to be not just pagan but devilish. At the same time, however, much of what we know about Tenochtitlan and Aztec customs comes from accounts of Spanish writers who witnessed the last days of the Aztec Empire. The legacy of Aztec mythology remains strong within Mexico. Aztec images and themes have influenced the arts and public life. In the late 1800s, Mexico had won independence from Spain, but had not established its own national identity. Civic and cultural leaders of the new country begin forming a vision of their past that was linked with the proud and powerful Aztec civilization. Symbols from Aztec carvings, such as images of the god Quetzalcoatl, began to appear on murals and postage stamps. Mexico's coat of arms featured an eagle clutching a snake in its beak, the mythic emblem of the founding of the Aztec capital. During the 1920s, Mexico's education minister invited artists to paint murals on public buildings. The 3 foremost artists in their group were Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros. Although their works deal mainly with the Mexican Revolution and the hard life of Indians and peasants, the artists drew upon Aztec mythology for symbols and images to connect Mexico's present and its ancient past. Rivera, for example, once combined the images of the earth goddess Coatlicue and a piece of factory machinery. Aztec mythology has become part of Mexico's national identity. Chapter 2: Aztec Creation Story. How did the world begin? The Aztec creation story has its own answer, or you could say answers to that question. The 5 suns were the key to the rebirths of the world. The story of creation in ancient Mexico and surrounding areas actually changed as time went by. It was likely adapted by the Aztecs for their own political purposes, though even within the Aztec Empire there were variations of the story, but basic components of the story had evolved over centuries and centuries, so we do see similarities between the Aztec story and the beliefs of earlier cultures. The creation story, rebirth. Jaguar. The story of creation, according to the Aztecs, is actually a story of birth, death, and rebirth. When the world is destroyed, it is born again through the sacrifice of one of the gods, and so through the birth of a new son. So you'll often hear of the legend of the 5 sons, the 5 births of the world. 5 sons, and so 5 different worlds have existed. When the story is told, the order of the worlds is sometimes different. Sometimes there are even less than 5 sons, but the general idea remains the same. But it is not a story of endless cycles as you see in many other cultures. For the Aztecs, the universe did have an actual beginning. In the beginning. In the beginning the world was the void. It was at some ancient time in the Aztec creation story that the dual god, Ometecutli or Omechehuatl, created itself. Looking back, of course, the Aztecs believed that the many opposites that they saw in the world would have to somehow unite in the origin of the world. This god was good and bad, chaos and order, male and female. Being male and female, it was able to have children. It had 4, which came to represent the 4 directions of north, south, east, and west. The gods were Huitzilopochtli, south, Quetzalcoatl, east, Tezcatlipoca, west, and Xipe-Totec, north. The directions were very important to the Aztecs, since their great empire was believed to be at the very center of the universe. Remember what I mentioned about the Aztec creation story being political. These 4 gods began to create. They created water and other gods, and the sea monster Kipakli. Kipakli was part fish and part crocodile, a massive creature as big as all things that now are. This was a consuming monster, a jaw at every joint. Kipakli was to become the source of the cosmos in a strange way. As the gods continued to create, they had a problem. Their creations would fall into the water and be eaten by the dreadful Kipakli. So it was time for war. The 4 gods attacked the sea monster, pulling her in 4 directions. She fought back, biting Tezcatlipoca and tearing off his foot, but at last Kipakli was destroyed. From this enormous creature the universe was created. In some traditions this happened between the last 2 suns. All the 13 heavens stretch into her head. The earth was created in the middle, and her tail reaches down into the underworld, Mictlan. 9 underworlds to be exact. You could say that in the Aztec creation story, the world is on the back of this sea monster, floating in the water of space, reminiscent of the Iroquois belief that the world rests on the back of a turtle. Here is another perspective on the Aztec creation beliefs. The first sun, Jaguar sun, otherwise known as Nanhui-Ocelotl. To complete the world, the great source of energy had to be created, the sun. This is the key to the cycles in the Aztec creation story. But the sun is so powerful it can't just be created. It can only come into being through the sacrifice of a god. The god chosen was Tezcatlipoca. Tezcatlipoca only managed to become half a sun, however, making this first creation incomplete. During the First Age, the gods created giants from ashes and gave them acorns to eat, between Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. In the end, the sun was knocked from the sky, and in anger Tezcatlipoca sent jaguars to destroy the giants. The second sun, Wind Sun, otherwise known as Nanhui-Acatl. At this point, Quetzalcoatl took over from his brother as the sun. Humans were created as they are now, normal-sized. They lived on piñon nuts, and for a while all things were fine, but the people became corrupt, and perhaps out of revenge, Tezcatlipoca turned them into monkeys. Furious, Quetzalcoatl sent a hurricane to blow the monkeys away. The third sun, Rain Sun, Nahiquehuitl. Tlaloc was one of the early creations of the gods, the god of rain and water. He became the next sun, but his personal problems became his downfall. Once again, Tezcatlipoca was the instigator. Tezcatlipoca stole Tlaloc's wife, Xochiquetzal, and Tlaloc was grief-stricken. He shone as the sun but refused to send rain. In spite of the pleas of the people, drought swept the earth, and finally, in rage, Tlaloc made it rain fire, burning away this version of the world. Another version attributes the destruction of this world directly to the continuing battle between Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl. The fourth sun, Water Sun, Nahui-atl. The Aztec creation story continues. This time the god selected Tlaloc's sister to be the sun. She was Calchiuhetliquiu, but filled with jealousy, Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl struck down the sun. As she fell, the sky opened up and water flooded the earth. All things were destroyed. In the darkness between the suns, Quetzalcoatl descended into the underworld to bring up the bones of the dead. They would be used to bring life to the people who are now here. That's a whole other story. The fifth sun, Earthquake Sun. The gods gathered to bring another sun into being. This is where the Aztec creation story really gets around to explaining what the world is today. The proud god, Tecuitzitecatl, offered himself, but the other gods preferred the humble Nanahuatzin. A great fire was built, but Tecuitzitecatl was too afraid at the last minute to jump in. Nanahuatzin did jump. Filled with jealousy, Tecuitzitecatl jumped after, followed by a brave eagle and jaguar. Two suns began to rise in the east. It was too bright. The gods threw a rabbit into the face of Tecuitzitecatl to dim the light, and he became the moon. But Nanahuatzin was weak. He was motionless, so the other gods gave their blood to give him the energy to rush across the sky. This is the world in which we now live. The Aztecs believed its end would come in massive earthquakes. Here's something else interesting about the Aztec creation story. The identity of the final sun isn't as simple as it may seem. The following section contains more on the Aztec sun god. Chapter 4. The Legend of the Goddess Mayahuel in Aztec Mythology. The myths and legends of Mexico have been shared by storytellers for centuries. In many cases there are multiple versions of a myth, such as this one about the origins of the agave. Long ago, when we were ruled by the seasons and feared the gods, a young and very beautiful goddess lived. She was the subject of much speculation. How could there be such a beauty, and why did she live in seclusion? Ancient life was filled with rituals and passion. The gods were equally mercurial. They fell in love and felt the rage of jealousy, experienced joy and sorrow, and had the power to rule earth and its inhabitants. While 400 drunken rabbit gods cavorted in 13 heavens, and Metzil delivered Luna each night to light the dark sky, young Mayahuel was hidden in a far corner of the universe by her jealous and possessive grandmother, Tzitzimitl. Young Mayahuel longed for love and passion in her life. She dreamed of romance, of rescue, of escaping the terrible confines of her secluded prison. She sat at the edge of a cloud every night and sang a song both alluring and filled with sadness. The serpent god of the wind, known as Ecatl, heard her siren song on the wind. He sent to the four corners of the universe. Mesmerized, he followed the sound until he found beautiful Mayahuel. He instantly fell madly in love with her. His passion untamed, he curled his breeze around her body, caressing her. Floating on the air of Ectel, Meahuel slowly danced with him until they became one. Each night they met, and each night they travelled on his soft breeze until she no longer returned to Titsmittle's home. Titsmittle was enraged. In her heart she knew that trying to stop passion was impossible, for when it appears it is stronger than all the heavens combined. She plotted to kill the lovers. Aware of Titsmittle's plan, Ecketal quickly enveloped Meahuel in a powerful embrace of wind and swept her to earth. As they embraced, their bodies melted in passion until they became a beautiful plant with many green spires to symbolize their ascent to the heaven, and spikes to keep the furious Titsmittle away. As a maguey, their beauty shimmered in the hot desert, their passion still evident in the lush, water-laden spires. When Titsmittle found them, she wielded her sharp machete as she cursed the power of love and swiftly cut the maguey in half. Rage-filled destruction ensued as she cut the plant into tiny pieces, which she cooked until it became a broth she fed to her legions of demons. But in her haste she missed a small, beautiful green spire, and left it to dry and wither on the desert floor. Ecketal swept the spire on his strong breeze and planted it in the rich volcanic soil. Overcome with grief, he shed great tears bestowed on him by Tlaloc, the god of rain. Resolute in his grief, his tears gave sustenance to Meahuel, and the spire transformed into a maguey so beautiful it overwhelmed the Aztecs when they saw it. Meahuel reawakened as the maguey, agave, and from that moment has been a symbol of passion and transformation as an elixir of culture created around magic and love. The equally interesting scientific explanation for the proliferation of agave. The trans-Mexican volcano belt runs from Jalisco to northeast Michoacán, and includes southern Guangzhou, southern Querétaro, Mexico State, southern Hidalgo, and Tlaxcala to central Veracruz. One of these volcanoes, the Volcan de Tequila, last erupted around 220,000 years ago, sending volcanic ash and mineral-laden lava flowing to lower-lying areas. Although this volcano is now considered extinct, there are several volcanoes in the region, including Volcan Nevado de Colima, which is still very active. This rich soil, a combination of arid clay and volcanic deposits, is perfect for the agave, as is the climate. The higher elevation of soil near Jalisco contains more red clay, and the lower elevations contain a higher concentration of volcanic soil, giving each a distinct terrain. You can thank nature and volcanoes for the glass of tequila you're enjoying. Chapter 5: Aztec Creation Myths. Mesoamerican creation myths are the collection of creation myths attributed to or documented for the various cultures and civilizations of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The Maya gods included Kukulkan, also known by the K'iche' name Gukmats, and the Aztec name Quetzalcoatl, and Tipu. The two were referred to as the creators, the forefathers or the makers. According to the story, the two gods decided to preserve their legacy by creating an earthbound species looking like them. The first attempt was man-made from mud, but Tipu and Kukulkan found that the mud crumbled. The two gods summoned the other gods, and together they decided to make man from wood. However, since these men had no soul and soon lost loyalty to the creators, the gods destroyed them by rain. Finally, man was constructed from maize, the Mayan staple and sacred food. The deity, Itzamna, is credited as being the creator of the calendar along with creating writing. Quetzalcoatl, the Light One, and Tezcatlipoca, the Dark One, looked down from their place in the sky and saw only water below. A gigantic goddess floated upon the waters, eating everything with her many mouths. The two gods saw that whatever they created was being eaten by this monster. They knew they must stop her, so they transformed themselves into two huge serpents and descended into the water. One of them grabbed the goddess by the arms, while the other grabbed around the legs, and before she could resist, they pulled until she broke apart. Her head and shoulders became the earth, and the lower part of her body the sky. The other gods were angry at what the two had done, and decided, as compensation for her dismemberment, to allow her to provide the necessities for people to survive. So from her hair they created trees, grass and flowers, caves, fountains, and wells from her eyes, rivers from her mouth, hills and valleys from her nose, and mountains from her shoulders. Still, the goddess was often unhappy, and the people could hear her crying in the night. They knew she wept because of her thirst for human blood, and that she would not provide food from the soil until she drank. So the gift of human hearts is given her. She who provides sustenance for human lives demands human lives for her own sustenance. So it has always been, so it will ever be. The mother of the Aztec creation story was called Coatlicue, the Lady of the Skirt of Snakes. Coatlicue, also known as Tioinan, also transcribed as Tito Inan, the mother of gods, is the Aztec goddess who gave birth to the moon, stars, and Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. She is also known as Toki, our grandmother, and Chiucoatl, the Lady of the Serpent, the patron of women who die in childbirth. The word Coatlicue is Nahuatl for the one with the skirt of serpents. She is referred to by the epithets Mother Goddess of the Earth who gives birth to all celestial things, Goddess of Fire and Fertility, Goddess of Life, Death and Rebirth, and Mother of the Southern Stars. She is represented as a woman wearing a skirt of writhing snakes and a necklace made of human hearts, hands and skulls. Her feet and hands are adorned with claws for digging graves, and her breasts are depicted as hanging flaccid from nursing. Coatlicue keeps on her chest the hands, hearts and skulls of her children, so they can be purified in their mother's chest. Almost all representation of this goddess depicts her deadly side, because Earth, as well as Living Mother, is the insatiable monster that consumes everything that lives. She represents the devouring mother, in whom both the womb and the grave exist. According to the legend, she was magically impregnated while still a virgin by a ball of feathers that fell on her while she was sweeping a temple. She gave birth to Quetzalcoatl and Zootl. In a fit of wrath, her 400 children, who were encouraged by Coalzouqui, her daughter, decapitated her. The god Huitzilopochtli afterwards emerged from Coatlicue's womb, fully grown and girded for battle, and killed many of his brothers and sisters, including decapitating Coyazcohiqui and throwing her head into the sky to become the moon. In a variation of this legend, Huitzilopochtli himself is conceived by the ball of feathers incident and emerges from the womb in time to save his mother from harm. A massive sculpture known as the Coatlicue Stone was discovered by the astronomer Antonio de Leon Yagama in August of 1790, after an urban redevelopment program uncovered artifacts. 6 months later, the team discovered the massive Aztec Sunstone. De Leon Yagama's account of the discoveries was the first archaeological work on pre-Columbian Mexico. Coatlicue was created in the image of the unknown, decorated with skulls, snakes, and lacerated hands. There are no cracks in her body, and she is a perfect monolith, a totality of intensity and self-containment. Yet her features were square and decapitated. Coatlicue was first impregnated by an obsidian knife, and gave birth to Coalzouqui, goddess of the moon, and to a group of male offspring who became the stars. Then one day Coatlicue found a ball of feathers, which she tucked into her bosom. When she looked for it later, it was gone, at which time she realized that she was again pregnant. Her children, the moon and stars, did not believe her story. Ashamed of their mother, they resolved to kill her. A goddess could only give birth once, to the original litter of divinity and no more. During the time they were plotting their demise, Coatlicue gave birth to the fiery god of war, Huitzilopochtli. With the help of a fire serpent, he destroyed his brothers and sisters, murdering them in a rage. He beheaded Coyolxauhqui and threw her body into a deep gorge in a mountain, where it lies dismembered forever. The natural cosmos of the Indians was born of catastrophe. The heavens literally crumbled to pieces. The Earth Mother fell and was fertilized, while her children were torn apart by fratricide and then scattered and disjointed throughout the universe. Ometacutli and his wife, Omekehuatl, created all life in the world. Their children were Xipe-Totec, the lord of the springtime; Huitzilopochtli, the sun god; Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent; Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and sorcery; Coatlicue, she of the serpent skirt. Chapter 6. Celestial Demons in Aztec Mythology. Tzitzimime. Tzitzimime were celestial demons in Aztec mythology that continuously threatened to destroy the world. A female Tzitzimitl demon, Codex Magabeciano. The Tzitzimime, monsters descending from above, were celestial demons in Aztec mythology that continuously threatened to destroy the world. They are said to be the stars that battle the sun each dusk and dawn. One story from the Histoire du Mexique describes the wrath of Tzitzimime. Miahuel was the goddess of Magwe, who lived with her grandmother, a Tzitzimime in the sky. One time Quetzalcoatl convinced her to descend to earth with him, and join with him into a forked tree, with Quetzalcoatl as one branch and Miahuel as the other. When Miahuel's grandmother awakens and finds her missing, she summons other Tzitzimime to find her granddaughter. They descend to earth, and just as they arrive, the tree that Quetzalcoatl and Miahuel had hidden as splits in two. Recognizing her granddaughter as one of the branches, she tears it apart and passes the remains of Miahuel to the other Tzitzimime to devour, leaving the branch that Quetzalcoatl disguised himself as fully intact. After they had left, Quetzalcoatl gathered up Miahuel's bones and buried them, and from that grave the first maguey plant grew. Maguey was the source of an alcoholic beverage that was important in Aztec ceremonies, as both a drink and a sacrificial offering. Chapter 7. Things you didn't know about the Aztec gods. Religion was very important in Aztec society and culture. The Aztecs worshipped many gods and goddesses, each of whom ruled one or more human activities or aspects of nature. The people had many agricultural gods, because their culture was heavily based on farming, and also included natural elements they identified with their deities. Take a look at these 25 interesting things about some of the most dominant and significant Aztec gods and goddesses that will definitely stimulate your curiosity. There were hundreds of Aztec gods. Aztec religion. Despite the fact that your average Joe doesn't know the names of more than a handful of Aztec gods, and even the ones he knows he has a very hard time spelling, the truth is that the pantheon of the Aztec civilization was enormous, with hundreds of gods and goddesses. Aztec gods were two-faced, literally and metaphorically. Most Aztec gods had two sides, good and bad, to their personalities as well as two faces. The Aztec pantheon was male-dominated. Over 2/3 of the Aztec gods were male, and less than 1/3 were female. Even the Aztec world was a man's world. Aztec gods required a lot of blood. Aztec human sacrifice. One thing concerning Aztec gods and the Aztec religion is that these required a lot of human sacrifices, occurring in possibly greater numbers than in any other religion in history. These sacrifices were performed by Mexica priests at the pyramids of the sun and moon. Slaves hated Xipe-Totec, and for good reason. Xipe-Totec was the god of suffering, diseases, and goldsmiths. The problem with this god was that his worship required the flaying of a slave and the wearing of his skin. Ouch. Tlaloc. Tlaloc was an Aztec water god who was widely worshipped as a giver of life and sustenance, but was also feared for his ability to send hail, thunder, and lightning, especially when someone pissed him off. Chalchi-Hitliquiu loved rain. Literally. Chalchi-Hitliquiu was the Aztec goddess of rivers, lakes, streams, and other fresh water. She was in love with rain, and no, we aren't using that term metaphorically, since she was the wife of the rain god Tlaloc. Camaxtli was the Aztec version of the Greek god of war Ares. He might not be as famous as his European brother, but trust us when we say Camaxtli was as bad as the famous Greek god. He was the Aztec god of war, hunting, and fate, and creator of fire. He was also one of the 4 gods who created the world. Tezcatlipoca inspired Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The main rite of Tezcatlipoca's cult took place during Toxcatl, the 5th ritual month. Every year at that time, the priest selected a young, handsome prisoner of war. For 1 year he lived in princely luxury, impersonating the god. 4 beautiful girls dressed as goddesses were chosen as his companions. On the appointed feast day, he climbed the steps of a small temple while breaking flutes he had played. At the top he was sacrificed by removal of his heart. So Mola Ram wasn't Steven Spielberg's pure creation after all. Huitzilopochtli didn't really like his siblings that much. Huitzilopochtli's mother, Coatlicue, conceived him after having kept in her bosom a ball of hummingbird feathers that fell from the sky. Huitzilopochtli, who became the Aztec god of the obsidian knife, sprang forth from his mother's belly to kill his siblings before they killed him. Now that's brotherly love. Huitzilopochtli can be found on Mexico's flag. Huitzilopochtli's first shrine was built on the spot where Mexica priests found an eagle that was poised upon a rock while devouring a snake, an image so important to Mexican culture that it is portrayed on the national flag of Mexico. The eagle was seen as a representation of the sun god Huitzilopochtli, and was very important to the Mexicas, who referred to themselves as the people of the sun. Ometacutli was the only Aztec god to whom no temples were erected. Despite being one of the primordial gods and lord of life, Ometlicu was the only Aztec god for whom no temple was erected. This happened because the Aztecs saw him as remote in the heavens and assumed he would never interact with them directly, but they were aware of his presence in every ritual act and every rhyme in nature. Xochiquetzal shares quite a few similarities with Aphrodite and Persephone from Greek mythology. Xochiquetzal was the patroness of erotic love, just like Aphrodite in Greek mythology. She was also the goddess of vegetation, artistry, and the protector of prostitutes. It was also believed she was taken against her will to the underworld by Exotl, because she had eaten a forbidden fruit. Ring any bells? And she had a hippie twin. Xochiquetzal's twin, Xochipilli, was the god of flowers, maize, love, games, song, and dance. He could easily be the god of hippies now we think about it. Ometeotl was in reality 2 gods in one. Ometeotl, 2-god, is a name sometimes used to refer to the pair of Aztec gods Ometecutli and Omequihuatl. Ometecutli and his female counterpart Omequihuatl represented the primordial forces of nature and duality, and were considered the parents of many of the other major gods. Sometimes they are called husband and wife, but they were really considered 2 sides of the same dualistic god, and were sometimes depicted as half-man, half-woman figures. Quetzalcoatl was the creator of humans. Quetzalcoatl was a very important god. It was believed he was the one who created humans. However, He wasn't the first to create them. According to Aztec mythology, the world had been created 4 times before, and destroyed by infighting each time. Quetzalcoatl retrieved human bones from the underworld and added his blood to bring them to life. But his best friend was a dog-headed god, Exotl. They say a dog is a man's best friend, but in Quetzalcoatl's case, it appears they are a god's best friend too, with Exotl as his companion, a dog-headed god. Quetzalcoatl was said to have descended to the underground hell of Mictlantecuhtli to gather the bones of the ancient dead. These bones he anointed with his own blood, giving birth to the men who inhabit the present universe. Huitzilopochtli needed human blood to fight evil. Huitzilopochtli was a warrior sun god who required blood sacrifice to help him win the battle against darkness and evil spirits. Fortunately for humans, this was not always in the form of human sacrifice, and sometimes just a little bloodletting was enough. Oxomoco and Quiapcatonal were the Adam and Eve of the Aztec culture. The Aztec believed that Oxomoco and Quiapcatonal were the first human couple, and so they were for Aztec culture and religion what Adam and Eve were for Judaism and Christianity. They bore a son named Tlintzintecuhtli, who married a maiden, daughter of Xochiquetzal. Oxomoco was later upgraded to an Aztec deity, the goddess of night, astrology, and the calendar. Few people still worship Aztec gods today. When the Spanish colonizers forced the locals to convert to Christianity, the Nahuas, who were pure descendants of the Aztec, carried on worshipping their old sun god, Tohitla, in the form of Jesus. Very few still worship Tohitla today. Huehueteotl, the oldest god of all. Every Aztec household had a little shrine to the oldest god of all, Huehueteotl, the fire god. A typical celebration in his honor consisted of feasts and a time of ceasing hostilities. The Aztecs would cut out hearts of human sacrifices, followed by burning them on coal. As a result, the people would regain Huehuetotl's favor through his elements fire and blood. Huehuetitu. Huehuetitu was the ultimate feminist goddess. Huehuetitu embodied all female spirits, and the souls of women who died in childbirth. Childbirth was considered a form of battle in Aztec culture, and its victims were honored as fallen warriors. However, Huehuetitu and her army of female souls loved to haunt crossroads at night, stealing children and causing sickness, especially seizures and madness, and seducing men to engage in sexual misbehavior. Huitzilopochtli was the boss of the Aztecs. Despite there being a dispute between scholars who study Aztec culture, it seems as if Huitzilopochtli was the great god of the Aztecs. His worship fueled the battles and sacrifices of the people, and his temples were built in the hearts of the cities. The Templo Mayor contained his temple, and his image was on Moctezuma's throne. The Aztec gods didn't all come from the same source. Many different cultures made up the empire, so their gods were frequently adopted and either added to the descriptions of existing gods or simply put into the pantheon. Gods were mortals and could die in the Aztec religion. Aztec gods could die and be reborn more than once. For that matter, the gods would often sacrifice themselves to set the world in motion, but soon after would be reborn. Chapter 8. Aztec Empire, Art, Myth, and Religion entwined in stone. The Aztecs' Empire. While many other Aztec works were destroyed either by the Spanish or by the degradations of time, Aztec stone carvings remain to give us a glimpse into the world view of this supreme Mesoamerican culture. These masterpieces were discovered in Mexico City, in the buried ruins of the former Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, and its grand pyramid, Templo Mayor, statue of Coatlicue. Coatlicue was the Aztecs' Earth Mother goddess. Although a fearsome one, goddess of the earth, childbirth, fertility, and agriculture, she represented the feminine power of both creation and destruction. A massive stone statue of Coatlicue was discovered in Mexico City in 1790. Almost 12 feet tall and 5 feet broad, the statue shows the goddess as much a goddess of death as of birth, with 2 facing serpents as her head, claws on her hands and feet, a skirt of serpents and a necklace of skulls, hands and hearts. She reveals the Aztecs' terrifying view of their gods. The myth of Coatlicue tells of the birth of Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war and the sun. The myth of Coatlicue tells of a priestess sweeping the sacred temple on Mount Coatepec, when she was impregnated by a ball of feathers. Her son, Huitzilopochtli, is born full grown when Coatlicue is attacked by her daughter, the moon goddess. The newborn warrior kills his sister and cuts her into pieces, symbolizing the victory of the sun over the moon. The statue was so horrifying that each time it was dug up, it was reburied. The statue now resides at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Stone of Tizoc. The Stone of Tizoc is a carved disc showing the victory of Emperor Tizoc over the Matalzinca tribe. The emperor had it carved to celebrate his victory and reveal the martial power of the Aztecs. The large circular disc has an 8-pointed sun carved on the top, which was used for sacrificial battles. A warrior captured in battle was tied to the stone and armed with a feather-lined club. The Aztec warriors, armed with obsidian-lined clubs, fought the tied warrior and naturally defeated him. The side of the 8-foot diameter discs depicts Tizoc's victory. The Matalzinkas are shown as despised barbarians, while Tizoc and his warriors are represented as noble Toltec warriors. The Stone of Tizoc artfully mixes sun worship, mythology, and Aztec power. Today, this masterful carved stone is at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Sunstone. Another massive stone disc, the carvings of the Sunstone, also known as the Calendar Stone, show the 4 consecutive worlds of the Aztecs, each one created by the gods only to end in destruction. This basalt stone, 12 feet in diameter and 3 feet thick, was discovered near the cathedral in Mexico City in the 18th century. At the center is the sun god Tonatiuh. Around Tonatiuh are the 4 other suns, which met destruction as the gods Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca fought for control. After the destruction of a sun and the epoch it represented, the gods had to recreate the world, and humans until finally the 5th sun held. At either side of the center, jaguar heads and pawns hold hearts representing earth. Fire serpents are at the bottom of the stone, as their bodies snake around the edges. The sunstone carving is probably one of the most recognized artwork of the Aztec world. Chapter 9. The Aztec women who supposedly became goddesses after dying during childbirth. For the ancient Nahuas, there was no element more sacred than the sun. The Mesoamerican people's understanding of the cosmos lies in the quality of life and death as the basis of the order of the universe. The sun would die each dusk, hiding behind the west horizon, only to be reborn each morning in the east. But the Star King was not alone in his daily renewal. From midnight into the zenith, he was accompanied by the Ejercito, the spirit of brave warriors who had died in combat. From noon on, the dying sun was guided by goddesses who had proven their courage during battle, the Chiuatitu, women who had reached the divine after dying during childbirth. Chiuatitu Aztec goddesses childbirth. 1. Birth has a predominant place in most of the world's cultures, and the pre-Columbian civilizations were no exception. The joining of birth and death, the moment in which one life begins and another ends, took on a sacred quality for the Aztecs. After the birth, the midwife would celebrate a ritual to commemorate this event. However, if something went wrong and the woman giving birth died, her image would take on a new meaning. The dead bodies of women who died in labour were seen as divine. Their bravery was admired by their community. After the funeral ceremonies were done, the male relatives would guard the women's remains from warriors who would steal parts of their body as tokens of courage. Cihuatitu Aztec Goddesses Childbirth 2. The Cihuatitu would then move on to live out eternity in Quincalco, the temple of corn, to serve as guides for the sun each dusk. They were adored and related to Cihuacoatl, goddess of motherhood. However, the veneration of Cihuatitu came with a dark side. These goddesses would also carry misfortune, spreading fear and despair among the living. It is believed that these deities would appear as wanderers on crossroads or paths. Some ancient codex and inscriptions show them having a skull head, claws, and being surrounded by animals related to death and darkness. Cihuatitu Aztec Goddesses Childbirth 3. Their presence also became an essential element of fatal omens that, according to the Nahua tradition, started to appear a decade prior to the arrival of the Spanish. The sixth of these omens, showing a wailing woman on the road, is not only significant of the cries of Cihuacoatl, but also of the Cihuatitu. It is said that the goddesses of the Cihuatitu would descend under the sign of the Quiosmalti to paralyze small children. Parents would not let their children leave the house out of fear they would encounter these deities. Cihuatitu Aztec Goddesses Childbirth 4. As time passed, particularly after the fall of the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, the dark duality of the Cihuatitu was influenced by Hispanic tradition, transforming their nature into a malignant creature, not unlike the European idea of ghosts. During the early days of the colonial period, the divinity of mothers who died during childbirth was eventually forgotten. The remnants of this legend became the ghost story of La Lorna, or the Weeping Woman. Closing remarks. Thank you for buying this book and listening to it. If you have a moment, please leave a review. The author as well as the narrator take reviews very seriously and will always look at them. This is a great way of providing feedback and improved content. A review doesn't have to be long, only 1 or 2 sentences, and a number of stars you find appropriate. Hopefully 5. Please note by way of a disclaimer, this information is provided as is. The author, publishers and/or marketers of this information disclaim any loss or liability, either directly or indirectly as a consequence of applying the information presented herein, or in regard to the use and application of said information. No guarantee is given, either expressed or implied, in regard to the merchantability, accuracy or acceptability of the information. The content of this book has been copyrighted.